I think we've had a series of very interesting panels presenting a range of views on both the Chinese side and on the American side. It's clear that and I think it's fair to say that the differing views expressed by the various panelists is indicative of differences in views that are held by larger groups of people outside. These are not people just expressing a personal view, that in fact, in every case, there are others who hold some of the divergent views that have been expressed. We've just heard American expressions of views about how they see China as acting in East Asia, and reflections on how the United States should or should not behave. And now in our final session, we have an opportunity for the Chinese panelists, who have treated us to two very interesting sessions concerning attitudes in China on security and economic types of issues, to respond. Some of the issues that I think it would be useful for our Chinese panelists to address, one of the questions that emerged is this issue of, is China a status quo power or is it not? And if it is not, is it China trying to overturn the status quo and create a new status quo, which was called a revisionist power, or is it only trying to tweak the status quo? In other words, it accepts the general framework, but it wants some specific changes in particular areas. I think it would be interesting to hear some views from our Chinese participants on that. But there are some other issues, I think, that we also need to address. One of them that came up at the very end of the session was this issue of, is a global hegemon necessary in order to stabilize an international system? If the answer is yes, of course, then the answer is, should that global hegemon be China or the United States? And we might find that there were several hundred countries that didn't agree with either of those answers. But nevertheless, it's a legitimate question to ask, whether or not regional and global stability depends on a dominant player who can somehow enforce the rules. The third possibility, which was not discussed, is whether you can establish a well-ordered international system that does not require a hegemonic power, because the players will essentially abide by the rules of the game. And in some ways, we find in Europe, that's the experiment that's going on in the EU, and we can see how difficult that is, because not all of the players play by the game. And in some cases, that's the problem with international system. There's the issue of whether the United States feels it has to maintain predominance in East Asia, and that's contrasted by the view that China considers U.S. predominance unacceptable. And then there was not unanimity of view on the American side as to whether or not it's necessary for the United States to maintain predominance, with Michael Green, for example, expressing the view that that's not necessary as in order for the United States to protect its vital interests. There's the question of whether the island disputes in the East China Sea and the South China Sea are in fact merely a symptom of a geopolitical interest on the part of China of controlling the first island chain. In other words, that this is linked into a larger strategic approach to the region. There is the question of whether financial crises can be a key engine of fundamental change, such as happened after the Asian financial crisis, when the government in Indonesia lost its legitimacy and resulted in a change in the whole nature of the government in Indonesia. And the collateral question on that would be whether an economic crisis affecting China could somehow produce a more fundamental change. That wasn't really explored, but the idea was put out there, that financial crises can be an instrument of change in otherwise reasonably stable systems. So we can either start going through those, or if I think it might be useful to first ask each of the Chinese participants if there was a particular issue that struck you that you would like to address. General Zhu, why don't we begin with you, and then I can pose some of these questions I've already laid out if they aren't already covered adequately in our first go-round.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe that China is not a status quo power. China is a newcomer to the world systems and regimes. And China became a member of the World Trade Organization very late. Actually, China is trying its efforts, or has been trying its efforts, to adapt itself to the existing order instead of trying to transform or change or revise the existing systems and regimes. I agree with Tate Carpenter that at most China is cautiously revisionist power instead of a radical revisionist power. And it is because we Chinese have been benefited a lot from the existing systems and regimes. Therefore, we Chinese will continue to abide by the regimes, systems, etc. China is not strong enough to upset the existing regimes and systems. And we do not have the capability to modify it. We have to adapt ourselves to the existing regimes and systems. Actually, these systems and regimes have been formulated under the dominance of Western developed countries. Actually, some of the articles are not very in the interest of China, but we have to abide by them. This is true. Secondly, I think the world needs a leader. But we hope that the leadership of the United States is benign. We hope that the United States will reduce its use of force. And we hope that the leader should be fair enough in world affairs. Do not try to introduce double standard or multiple standard. We hope that the United States will be equal to different countries with different political systems, with different histories, with different economic development level, or with different cultures, etc. I don't think the world could have been so stable without the leadership of the United States, without the contribution from the United States. But as a Chinese, especially as a Chinese soldier, we hope that the United States should be fair enough and do not introduce different policies to different countries. To be very frank, in East Asia, we have neither intention nor capability to drive the Americans away. We believe that United States military presence and involvement in East Asia help to control Japan from developing itself, from restoring militarism. And the United States plays constructive role in maintaining peace and stability on Korean Peninsula. And also, it plays a role in forcing the North Koreans to back to the negotiation table, etc. But as a Chinese, As you know, we are facing a lot of security problems, security challenges. And many of our security challenges and threats are from the United States. So I can tell you an argument from a college student. When I give a lecture in a university, this college challenged me about my assessment of U.S. role in East Asia. And these young people, I think she's an undergraduate. She says to me, look at China, or look at the United States. Chinese have never done anything damaging the security interests of the United States. Why look at the United States? All the security challenges and problems have been brought about to China, have been brought about the United States. And she argues, without the support of the United States, how could China have the problem of Taiwan? How could China have the problem of Tibet? And how could China have the problem of Xinjiang? This is an argument from a college student. So therefore, in East Asia, I believe that U.S. role is double-sided. On one side, it plays very constructive role. On the other side, it sometimes plays negative role. This is what I want to say. As far as the disputes over the islands, like Diaoyu Islands or Huangying Islands, actually, as I mentioned this morning, the nationalism in China has reached the peak. Of course, Professor Zhu disagreed with me. I believe that the government of China has been seriously criticized by the netizens. If you go to the website of China, you can find that government is seriously criticized. I don't think Chinese want to change the status quo in the territorial and the maritime disputes in both East China Sea or South China Sea. If you look at the development of the two crises, both of the crises have been initiated, created by Japan and the Philippines. The Chinese government were forced to take actions. Otherwise, it may bring about very serious consequences to China's stability, internal stability, and even serious challenges to dominance, to the leadership of the Communist Party of China. I hope that most of you are China watchers, so I hope that you will understand why the Chinese government has taken these sort of actions. As far as the financial crisis, in the previous financial crisis, we did see that financial crisis produced very, very tremendous impact on management and on the role and the nature of the governments of different countries, not only in Singapore, in Indonesia, but also in Seoul, etc. In South Korea, etc. So it's very, very difficult for me to predict whether a new financial crisis in China will change the nature of China's government. But I think will bring tremendous impact on China's development, on stability, and on the ways of management and approaches to different international reactions, etc. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Zhu, would you like to offer some thoughts?
Okay. First, on identity issue, if China is a status quo power or revisionist power, frankly speaking, I don't like such kind of approach to define a country as a status quo or revisionist, because the world is changing too fast and everything is in the process of changing. It's difficult for us to define if you are a status quo or not. If you look at the United States, I think the United States is a revisionist power in today's world. Before, the United States preferred free trade. Now it's more about fair trade. This is a fundamental change in norm formation. But if we really need to define in this way, I don't agree once again with Professor Zhu that China is mainly revisionist power. This is a General Zhu just said.
Cautious revision.
Cautious revisionist. I believe that China is mainly a status quo power. Why I'm saying that? Because if you look at the 30 years process of China's reform and opening up, especially engagement with the international society, China has been trying very hard to get involved into international system, which is dominated by the United States, and this system is very much based on liberalism and led by the Western powers. And China tried very hard to get involved in this international system. And I want to say that China get benefit from such kind of engagement and involvement. Look at China's development so fast. Without such kind of involvement of the international system and the international market, you cannot reach such kind of development. This is the first point that I think that we are status quo power. The other reason is that China has joined as many as international organizations and international institutions since the reform and opening up policy adopted. And China, generally speaking, by rules and norms of these institutions, according to the research done by Ian Johnston, and also others, Annie Kent or any others, they reached the conclusion that China mainly abide by the international rules and norms. I think this is why that China vowed that we take the path of a peaceful rise. And thirdly, that this is a long process of learning, and China is still in this learning curve to learn from the others, to learn from international systems. I think in the future, still there are a lot of room for China to learn. But I have to admit that we have to reform international system because it's not adequate for today's world. And the United States is doing such kind of things because of the financial crisis occurred in year 2008. And we created this G20, and we have done a lot of work in reforming international financial system and financial economics. If you define the United States in such kind of based on such kind of activities, and you can say that the United States is a revisionist power. So this is an identity issue. Secondly, on the United States primacy, we heard the previous session, four American scholars, leading scholars on this issue. I think this is a quite interesting issue. I think we need to discuss this. Primacy, American primacy in East Asia is reality. If you look at the current power structure in East Asia, the United States is in a primary position, and it's in a leading position in this region. I think we are not against such kind of a primacy of the United States, as long as the leadership of the United States is positive for the whole region, especially for the regional architecture. I would like to see positive role of the United States, especially positive leading role of the United States in this region. But sometimes we have doubts about such kind of leading role or such kind of leadership. For example, over this Diaoyu Island dispute, on the one hand, the United States say that we take no sides in disputes, but on the other hand, the United States said that our alliance with Japan will cover Diaoyu Island. So we have this very contradictory position of the United States. And also on other issues, when Mrs. Clinton, Secretary of State, talk about South China Sea issue, she used the word of Western Philippines Sea to describe the South China Sea. This is also, I think, sending a very different, very negative signal to this region. And this is not good for the regional cooperation, especially for the regional architecture building. So we would like to see a leading role, or positive, benign leading role of the United States. And U.S. dominance in this region. I hope that everybody here in this room to think seriously about how to share power with other rising powers in this region. Look at the Indian and look at China. You have to give them room. You have to give them space for them to play some kind of role in this region, especially in the regional architecture building. I think China has a role to play, and India has a role to play, and ASEAN has a role to play. And the United States has to think seriously about others' role in this region. Maybe this is a very serious question, and also a big challenge for the United States. Finally, what else? Finally, I would like to say something on so-called 新型大国关系, new type relations between major powers. Nobody mentioned this new concept. Maybe Americans don't like this because this is new, but I really think that we need to have some kind of thoughts on this new type relations between major powers. For me, I really gave it some thought because when I interviewed somebody else in China, there's no consensus over this, and even some people just use this concept but no contents. I think 4 things need to be thought or to be considered when we talk about this new type of relationships. First, what kind of a relationship between China and the United States? I think we are not allies, of course. This is true. And there won't be G2. I also believe that there won't be G2 because we are 2 different countries, and many of our panelists in the previous session mentioned the cultural difference, ideological difference, and many things in difference. So it's not easy, it's not possible for us to be an ally. Secondly, but I don't think that we will be rivals. We are not going to be a rival. We are not going to be adversary. We are not going to be having kinds of confrontation relationship because we are not the Soviet Union. China is not the Soviet Union. China is very different. So not our allies, but also not enemies and not rivals. Thirdly, I think that I really believe that Dr. Henry Kissinger's sentence or concept of co-evolution is a very good word for us to think. I just read his book on China. I think it's really thoughtful, insightful, and give us a lot of new ideas on Sino-American relations. And he knows very much about Chinese cultures and Chinese histories, and especially history between China and the United States. So I think a co-evaluation might be a very good word for us to catch up the nature of this relationship, especially when these two countries too big to be dominated by each other, respectively, and too unique to be transformed easily, and too interdependent to be isolated, respectively. So this relationship, especially the nature of this kind of relationship, really needs a kind of new ideas to jump out of this security dilemma. We discussed a lot about this security dilemma, but I don't think that this is a good expression. And finally, on this new type relationship, that I think we need to put our shoes into others' feet, put our feet into others' shoes, to co-practice. I invent this new concept, co-practice. We need co-practice. We need to be inclusive, not exclusive, and we need many joint programs and joint projects. I think Mr. Green proposed such kind of things. I really think that will help for the better relationship of our two countries. Thank you.
Thank you. Just one technical question, because the word evolution in Chinese is a loaded word. How do you prefer to say co-evolution? Is it 共同演变 is a problem? 共同进化, 共同演进. What's the best?
共同演进.
演进.
共同演进, right.
Okay, thank you.
Well, General Zhu prefers that China belongs to the category of revisionist. Professor Zhu, on the other side, China is on the part of status quo. As this meeting has a term, contending views from China.
Right.
I would offer the third view. China is neither a status quo nor a revisionist country. For a while, China was very revisionist. It's a radical revolutionary country. Training Filipino guerrillas, sending them back home to topple their government. So they were scared. China thought you don't have a rationale to live under your system. Your peasants, workers, ought to change your leadership. And American communists need to take the White House. But we have reformed. I think that kind of radical practice and idea would be gone, would never return. China used not to have this kind of radicalism. It's just once for a while. It's a short term and it's gone. That's not China. It's very un-China. It's done by Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong is both very Chinese and very un-Chinese. So this part of un-Chinese has been gone. But when we talk about status quo, which means the existing situation, institution, and how we deal with each other, the patterns, the rules, the norms, and everything which has been created mainly by the established power. they benefit from this. They created this. They ask us to do it. And if we do it, we sustain the status quo. If not, we are sort of revisionist. China used to hate revisionist because to revise Marxism-Leninism is no good. But to revise capitalism is good, but not good enough. We have to completely topple it. So we don't like Xiuzhenzuyi. And now we are very scared if we will be associated with a revisionist, which means we will challenge the current system. So Chinese government may have some difficulty with General Zhu when you say we are revisionist, even though you tell the truth. And the government does not want you to tell the truth. We want not to scare America, and we are on the same wavelength of yours, and we work together, and we co-development, co-evolve. That's not completely true. Take the issue of Taiwan, for example. The reality, the status quo is 4 no's. No war, no peace. I would say we have peace, but not a warm peace. It's a cold peace. And no de jure independence, so no independence, and no unification. In my view, this is the status quo. And the U.S. presidents, since Washington and Beijing normalized their relationship, America has been on the side of maintaining status quo. Namely, neither side of the across Taiwan Strait should venture to change the situation. And you have to consult with others and to make a joint decision to take common efforts. But somehow we agree with status quo, which means we don't want to have a war. We don't want to have a separation. But at the same time, you don't have one peace. You don't have unification. This kind of status quo is complicated. So what I want to present is that at this time we want to be a reformist. Take whatever is good, constructive, and to reform using incremental evolution, consultative, reconciliatory means to improve where it's weak in terms of the current status quo. But we want to change for better. The U.S., as Professor Zhu has mentioned, U.S. is a revisionist country. Need to better America from time to time. So if we check the reality, what is the definition of revisionist? Revise for better, not for worse. So China certainly, mainland China certainly wants to have one peace, eventual peaceful settlement, hopefully unification based on the agreement of peoples living across Taiwan Strait. And we should work harder toward that destination based on our being accepted by people living in Taiwan. And we may fail their expectation. And we may need to redouble our effort. So our party Congress has just expressed very constructive idea. We respect Taiwan people's view, and we want to expand our interaction. So this is very good argumentation. We respect why Taiwan people still have difficulty in doing business, political business with us. We respect. So this is very reconciliatory. So I would suggest that we are pro-constructive reformism. But sometimes we often fail to do this. We don't have enough experience. and we don't know how to use our added strengths. We think we have the right to do, but as some of our friend has just mentioned in previous session, that it's not a matter of intention, it's the way how you do it. Even we thought we have the right to do on Scarborough Shore, in Senkaku, what we call Huangyan Island and Diaoyu. The way we do could scare others. So we do not know how to do. And we need some failure. We need criticism. And we need to continue to be effectively constructive. Even we intend to be constructive, we could fail. We may not have evil intention, I would say. To understand that Diaoyu Island belongs to China, and without taking tangible action on it, shows our reconciliation. Until a day when Japan would raise the stake higher, that forced us to have quid pro quo action. But we still may reflect whether we can find a better action, unlike what we have done, to win the hearts of Japanese people, and to better shape the Japanese government to soften its position. So during this decade, when we quickly rise, we lack the experience, we do not know how to do business. But this necessary failure would exactly make China to be endowed with new treasures, the new kind of wealth through the failure. And our handling on Scarborough Shore is ours. We caution our fishermen, don't raise the stake high, and also not to be arrested. This is very passive, reconciliatory behavior. We may talk to Philippine government how to have joint development while sharing this dispute. And after Vietnam has negated their commitment concerning the sovereignty of Spratly, we have taken passive, reconciliatory stance and does not raise the stake high. But now other countries think that China is pushing the envelope too much. I would say neither direction is right. In the past, we should talk to Vietnamese government, but also propose reconciliatory solution. They may take some island, and they may reconfirm that some other island belong to China. We need to not merely observe Deng Xiaoping's argument, have a low-key policy. We should not merely respond to a positive solution or a negative provocation. We should be proactive in proposing workable solution. And it turns out that we are not able to do it. But I'm glad that in a decade ago, in 2002, in Cambodia, ASEAN and China concluded declaration of code of conduct, DOC, which claims, despite the fact that we have territorial dispute over this area, the disputed party are going to use peaceful means to settle their difference. Now U.S. is pushing to conclude a legal treaty, the COC, Code of Conduct. If that would be concluded, I think it will be of tremendous political significance, which means all parties forswear the use of violence to settle their territorial dispute. Actually, the employment of violence is of sovereign rights. Every country are entitled to use violence to settle their dispute. So you invade, I'm entitled to defend. If Iraq would invade Kuwait, Kuwait is entitled to use violence to defend its territory. But these 11 countries say, no, we want to lead the world by telling you we will be the first group of country which is committed to settle the dispute peacefully. So China has intended to do this 10 years ago, and now is being tested to see if it is truly 叶公好龙, just to talk about the rhetoric without the genuine intention to do it. I believe that through this torture, it's a real torture, China would pass in a positive way. And we still want to take all the island, but we would work with Vietnam, etc. So Chinese government last year made a bilateral agreement with Vietnam. The two countries are committed to settle their dispute peacefully, which means China is not going to use violence to expel Vietnamese force from the island we think they illegally occupied. So this kind of reformism plus constructivism, making China a credible country, but that need to be tested. I hope China should not spend more time suffering more, having more failure in order to be mature. And our friend can help us. But when my good friend Michael, one of the Michael Green, not you, states that the U.S. is neutral in terms of the island sovereignty, but not neutral in terms of
security treaty.
The security protection. Mm-hmm. Some say it's a U.S. Kind of a conflicting policy. I would say this is not a benign superpowers shaping to make the region stable. U.S. may state, under whichever circumstance, everyone should refrain from the use of force. Everyone. China is a leading power, should take the leadership in refraining. At the same time, U.S. would be a proactive part of this by refraining, using American power to engage into this question. So America can take a better position to shape China to be a more trusted, more predictable power, and to make Japan more acceptable power in the world, and America would pay less cost in sustaining the peace and stability. Turning to the primacy or supremacy, China has abandoned its idea to compete with otherism to export revolution. So there will be virtually no problem for anyone else to create a primacy, as long as that would not violate international law. If we have a police that would follow international law and provide public goods, that would be best in the world. And China is unable to do this. Others may not accept China, and China may not have the ability to generate acceptable public goods in terms of institution and products. But American is able. But meantime, American need to observe international law, not merely to point to China that why you do this. American need to be more pondering why go to Iraq, leaving 110,000 death toll, and what's the legal responsibility American should shoulder. So a superpower that would be as serious toward itself as toward other countries, including mainland China, would be respectable. And despite American serious failure in violating international law, China has not been tough to the U.S. Rather than Russia, Germany, France, and Kofi Annan. So this is China's passive reformism. China should be more proactive in telling the U.S., I'm your partner, I'm your friend, so I'm going to be critical. And the U.S. should not punish China simply because China would point to U.S. to where U.S. is weak. And if we would have not merely one hegemon, but a group of responsible hegemon, I think the world might be more balanced. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We only have 5 minutes left to explore some of the additional issues that were raised by earlier sessions, one of which is this concept that China is pursuing a counter-intervention and a counter-containment strategy, and that there's a contradiction between them. The other is the concept of a new type of relationship. That language has been used by Xi Jinping, it's been used by Hu Jintao at the Strategic and Economic Dialogue, and Secretary Clinton has also used the same language about trying to avoid repetitions of history by creating a new type of relationship that can stabilize competition and cooperation. But that runs into the question, some of the views expressed were that we can't end our strategic dilemma. And yet the new type of relationship is designed to try to deal with that dilemma. We don't really have time to explore these issues, but I wonder if you, General Zhu, do you accept the view that there is a contradiction between China's counter-intervention and counter-containment strategy?
This mainly refers to the Sino-U.S. relations. I think Professor Zhu repeated what Mr. Xi Jinping stated during his visit to the United States. I believe that it is very difficult for the Chinese and the Americans to manage the relationship in the near future. If we want this relationship is more constructive, I think there are mainly 3 issues. One is distrust. We are short of trust, not to mention strategic trust. And because of the short of trust, second problem is that there are miscalculations on both sides. Chinese believe that the big military exercises, the reconnaissances, the arms sale to Taiwan, the strengthening of military or security alliances, and the redeployment of strategic assets by the United States, all intended to encircle China, to contain China. And they even believe that because the Americans are believing that development of China may be used to and the Americans believe that the China's development may take over the leadership of the United States in the long future. Therefore, the Americans are taking these sort of preventive actions to contain China, to kill China's development in the cradle, so as to prevent China from developing into a peer enemy of the United States. While on the American side, they also have miscalculations. And they believe that China's military development in particular is intended to war against the United States. At least they are developed for the purpose of driving the Americans out of East Asia. So these miscalculations led to the action and the reaction. The third problem lying in the relations between China and the United States. That is to say, one action is taken by one side, the other side will have to take reactive actions against this sort of action. Therefore, I believe that Mr. Xi Jinping proposed the establishment of a new type of relationship between major powers is very important. Why new? Because one, situation is new. It's a globalized world. It's the information age. Balance of power has changed very rapidly. Therefore, second, we need to redefine the nature of the relationship between China and the United States. A pure enemy or friend cannot tell the true story or true nature of the United States, the relationship between the United States and China. We need to redefine the nature. We need to redefine the positions of the other side in your foreign policy and your foreign relations. And third is, and we also need to redefine the future orientation of development. And for this purpose, I believe that both sides don't try to encircle the others, to drive the others out. We need new thinking in managing the relationship. I think we need to manage the relationship because they are problematic. And fourthly, I believe that we need new ways of management. Each side should not take any provocative action against the other side. And each side should respect the core interest of the other side. Of course, to need to have new thinking, we will have to give up Cold War mentality, Cold War mindset. Because Chinese criticize the Americans are practicing Cold War mentality. But the Americans say the Chinese have the Cold War mentality. I believe both sides have Cold War mentality. Even Cold War has gone for so long time. Therefore, we have to give up this sort of ideas, this sort of mindset. And we need new thinking. Thank you.
Thank you. We're out of time, but maybe I can squeeze out 1 minute for each of you to make a statement if you wish.
Just one word. I fully agree with General Zhu on this redefining the nature of the relationship. We need to have a different approach to define this relationship, especially this relationship is always in process of redefining and shaping. And secondly, that we need a new thinking and a new way to manage the relationship. Don't forget the changing nature of the world, that is the interdependence, economically interdependence of this relationship is, which will be the basis for us to cooperate each other. And also that strategic and economic dialogue plays very important role for both of countries to communicate each other and to have a better understanding of each other. Don't look down upon this kind of strategic dialogue.
Mr. Shen?
Many disagree with the argument that international law can help settle our difficulties. But I'm a firm believer of international law. Through WTO, we are able to peacefully resolve most of the trade disputes. When the U.S. would sanction China, U.S. need to go to WTO expert consultation mechanism to give America a try. And they would give 70% of the chance to America that China is on the wrong side, and China would be gloomy, saying you are not impartial, but China internally start to change. So we avoid open war. We have a third party to judge which is right. We subject our economic trade sovereignty to a third party. This is great. I think we need to make international law to play such a positive role in respecting UN Charter, in respecting UNCLOS. And the U.S. is today, Director Harman told us that the U.S. is working on the ratification of the law of the sea. That's great. We need America to be proactive. And then how we reconcile the interpretation of the law, and each would take the leadership role in observing the law. That would make each of us predictable. and in a way that may be unfair to me at this time, but in long term, we will treat the convention will be applicable equally to each of us. So there is short-term and long-term benefit and cost, but we should aim at long-term equal benefit. And therefore, we can talk to any third party. You should follow us. We are a good observer of international law. And then to steal some patents, secrets from cyber attack makes short-term benefit. But our two countries could lose in long term in doing this. So why not China and US would negotiate to make a bilateral accord? We restrain our behavior to a certain level, to impose a limit. That would not make our relationship to be too much unpredictable. And let us to play the leadership role for forging an international convention of this. And that idea can apply to the outer space, to the seabed, and to make our relationship not greatly harmonious, but at least greatly predictable. That will be what we can do in a world which is anarchy without a police, but we should make ourselves a good student of international law.
Thank you. Could I suggest that the panel just remain here, and could I invite Professor Olampoli to just make a few closing remarks?
Thank you, Steve. First of all, I'm going to keep my comments short. We've had a long day, but I think you'll agree that we've heard some extremely refreshing, candid comments from all the panels. And as co-director, I wish I could thank each one of the persons involved in this conference individually, but I'll just echo my colleague Henry's thanks that he made earlier to everyone that was involved in making this success over at Woodrow Wilson Center as well as at the Sigur Center. Now, I do want to make three observations that I have just listening to the panels all day, and I'm going to focus on what our Chinese guests have said. Number one of the things that I think is very important for us to think about is the kind of power that China sees itself as. And we heard about revisionist, reformist, status quo, and so forth, which are somewhat value-laden, of course. But there are other ways of also thinking about it, and that is whether or not it's a developing country, which I think it was mentioned lightly. But as we heard, the real identity, international identity that we heard is of China as a major power, and that it is a very powerful country, and that one that will continue to build its military modernization without any apologies. And so that's sort of a foregone conclusion. But on the other hand, China sees its foreign policy behavior as being reactive, as being defensive, including what some of during the 2010 to 2012 period, which many outsiders saw as being assertive, I think that we saw as assertive, reflecting the rise of China's greater power. On the other hand, no one really seems to know exactly what China's identity is, and I'm not sure the Chinese, when we hear the differences, it's not clear that they've settled on a specific identity either. So what I see happening in the region particularly is countries under this sort of uncertainty engaging in what a word I didn't see today. I heard a lot of containment and countervailing, but hedging. I think many countries in the region and beyond are hedging their bets. So what we're not, so I think we won't see hard balancing or containment, or the opposite of that, a sort of pure institutionalism, international law, holding sway and so forth. So I think, so I would just like to throw out the idea of the continuing importance of the hedging behavior. Number two, one issue that came up is, what does China see as major threats? What is China's threat perception? And I thought it was revealing to hear the importance of the internal challenges that our Chinese colleagues mentioned, a variety of items, everything from economic inequality to social to ethnic to demographic to political challenges. So I think it's important for us to hear this and also to hear the view that if we add the external scenario, that China is sort of exceptional in the sense that it's the only major country with not only these deep internal challenges, but also the external security environment, including, as was pointed out, the unfinished business of Taiwan and also maritime challenges. And so, and at different points, I got the sense that U.S. is really not the major threat that China sees, but really it's the neighborhood. It's the neighbors. But it's neighbors plus the U.S. that's a real point of concern. And that brings up the whole issue of the U.S. rebalancing, U.S. pivot, and what it really means. And then that raises my question, on the one hand, is China really that welcoming of the U.S. after all? So that's still an open question. The number three, I was very intrigued to hear the discussion on Chinese nationalism. What I heard was concern by at least some of the panelists about popular nationalism. And I think what many outsiders, when they think about nationalism, is the state nationalism or the official nationalism, rather than the sort of populist or popular nationalism. And outsiders tend to see that state nationalism reflecting, again, China's assertiveness after its rise in power. Now, perhaps what's happening is that as outsiders, we tend to conflate the popular nationalism with the state or official nationalism. And of course, that could be a big mistake. What it points to, of course, is that we need to understand and pay close attention to the nuanced and divergent thinking on a variety of things in China, among the political classes, as well as among its other popular and unofficial groups. So I think I would say that that just vindicates the whole project in terms of looking out for differences of opinions in the country. Well, those are my 3 points that I just wanted to throw out. And now, before I bring the conference to a close, I want to take this opportunity to thank one person who has not been thanked and another person who deserves to be thanked twice. So let me just thank Henry, my colleague, who, of course, obviously wouldn't have thanked himself for all his hard work. And also I want to thank Pat Nicholas, who was held up and wasn't here when Henry thanked her. So Pat, I just want to reiterate our gratitude to you and to the Carnegie Corporation for continuing to support us. And now I would ask that you all join me in giving a big round of applause to our panelists here and our panelists earlier for doing a fantastic job all day long. Thanks to all of you for coming.